Hey guys, how you doing? I am MajorMeteor, and today we're going to be taking a quick look at Batman Arkham Knight. If you turn your minds back to June of this year, you'll remember that Batman Arkham Knight came out for the next-gen consoles and the PC. However, there was a slight catch with the PC version because the port of it was a little bit botched, to say the least. Frame rates were consistently low. In fact, they were locked at 30 frames per second, which you could unlock, but it meant that you had to go into the INI files, which was a pain. The graphics menu options were terrible. You couldn't turn on a lot of the options or turn off a lot of the options. And frame drops were very, very frequent. In fact, it was incredibly difficult to get this game to run at a consistent 60 FPS, even in the indoor sections. Now, as in today or the past couple of days, it has now been re-released on the PC with its brand new port. And I'm going to be looking at whether it is actually fixed or not. Spoiler alert, it sort of is, it sort of isn't. Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer at the start now. None of this is scientific in any way. I haven't done any benchmarks. I haven't fiddled around with the graphics settings or anything. This is just pure maxed out settings, seeing what the frame rate's like and comparing it to how it was 3 months ago. So in terms of graphics options, I am running this on completely ultra, apart from all of the NVIDIA GameWorks options. So that's volumetric fog, interactable paper things, realistic rain, and there's another one that I can't quite remember, but they are turned off, and the reason for that is because they cripple the frame rate. As in, if you want to play this game at a playable 60 FPS, you don't turn these on at all, because it is just going to cripple your frame rate. But everything else is absolutely maxed out. And if you want to have a look at my PC specs, they are listed on the back end of my channel over on the About page. The basics though is I'm running an AMD FX 8350 overclocked to 4.5 GHz with a GTX 980 graphics card. So on the surface, how does it run? Well, if you're outside and you're standing still and you're looking across the city, chances are you're going to be getting 60 FPS. There's not really that much movement going on, and even though the city is very dense, very pretty, the game does still manage to maintain its 60 FPS, which is more than could be said for the port 3 months ago, where it was difficult to get even 40. So in that respect, it's pretty decent. The other times that it manages to maintain 60 FPS is indoor sections, like constantly now. There's no dipping in and out of 30 and 50 frames per second. It's constantly at 60. And when you're in combat zones, so these can be outside, but when you're engaged in combat, chances are you're probably going to stay at 60. Where the game falls down though is when you're moving around the city. Now this is on foot or in the Batmobile. Now when the port came out 3 months ago, the Batmobile was the main issue. In fact, some people couldn't even play the game when they got in the Batmobile. Like, the frame rate dipped so low that it was just unplayable. 20 to 30 FPS is kind of playable. I mean, it's not pleasant at all, but it's kind of playable. When you start to get below 15 FPS, that's when it starts to become a bit of an issue, and some people were getting between 2 and 15 FPS when they were in the Batmobile. As for me, I was getting between 20 and 25, dipping down to the 10s a couple of times, but I was never able to get more than 35 at the most. So it really wasn't a pleasant experience, but I was able to play it. In fact, I actually finished the main campaign of Batman Arkham Knight whilst the game was broken, just because the game's a really, really good game. Like, in terms of gameplay and story, it's an interesting story and awesome for gameplay. Really rich, really dense. Probably one of my most favourite Arkham games. It's just the frame rate and the graphic settings that are letting it down. So now, when you're gliding across the city, this is where the issue starts, because I think the issues that were here 3 months ago still kind of are here for when you're moving around. And when I say moving around, I mean out in the open world, gliding, grappling, and doing all of that fast movement jazz. Now, on the new release, I am still getting dips from anywhere between 30 and 50. So it never stays at a constant 60, I'll say that. You can actually see the frame rate in the top left corner of this gameplay using fraps. And it sometimes dips. The lowest I've seen it dip to was 27, and that was in a very, very, very dense area, but the majority of the time it tends to dip in and out between 30 and 50, which isn't really pleasant at all. If it was a constant, steady 45, Maybe it would have been playable, well, it's playable. It would have been more pleasant if it was a steady 45, but because it's constantly fluctuating between 30 and 50, that's where the issue starts. So in that respect, I'd say it kind of still needs a little bit more work on it. I don't know whether Warner Brothers are actually going to do any more work on this at all, or whether they're just going to move on to whatever other projects they have. Just Cause 3's coming out at the end of the year, so they might move on to that, but who knows. But getting on to the big issue, the Batmobile. The Batmobile was the big issue, as I mentioned. Now, though, it seems to be pretty decent, actually. I'm actually quite impressed as to how much better my game's running in the Batmobile. I dipped to 30 once, and again, that was in the same area where I dipped to 27 whilst I was gliding. But for the majority of the time, it actually stayed right around 50, maybe dipping to 40 a couple of times, but it stayed pretty up there, and it was a constant frame rate as well. It wasn't like dipping in and out like it is when it glides. So would I recommend playing this game now? Yeah, I guess I would. I mean, I don't think it's going to get any better than what it already is. It might make a slight improvement, but at the end of the day, the game is goddamn pretty, and it's going to take some serious hardware to run it anyway. So if you want to play this game on PC, now is probably the time to do it. I mean, it's really not going to get any better than what it already is. So if you're wanting to play Batman on PC, go for it. I mean, the worst case scenario is that you're going to have to put up with 30 frames per second gliding outdoors. Luckily though, the gameplay doesn't actually it doesn't rotate around being outdoors a lot. It kind of rotates around being in the indoor sections and in the Batmobile a lot of the time. And as far as I can see, them sections are pretty much fixed. I mean, they're not perfect. They're not staying up there at 60 frames per second like Mad Max was, but I mean, it's playable. That's the baseline. It's playable. It's not completely pleasant, but it's playable. So there you have it, Batman Arkham Knight. Fixed or not fixed? You can let me know your opinion in the comments down below. If you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I've been MajorMeteor, and I'll catch you in the next one.